Hey, and welcome back to Riley's Library. Today I am doing a recap of everything that happens in the very first ACOTAR book. So I reread this for the first time with annotations, and so I'm going to share some of the annotations, things that I marked. I may miss some things, and we'll go through the plot as I do that. So if you don't want to have to reread all of the books before Crescent City 3, here's your opportunity that as I reread them, I'm going to make recap videos. If you want a much better in-depth recap video, there is someone on YouTube who makes, they're like 2 hours long though, but like very in-depth recap videos of these books, and I will link her video in the description so that if you want to check out her videos, you can. But this is going to be a much shorter version of one of those videos. Okay, so the very first plot detail that is important is Feyre. Our main character, Feyre, goes hunting. She is going to kill this deer when a wolf shows up, and she starts questioning whether or not this wolf is Fae, because there is the humans, and then there is a wall, and then there is Prythian, and that is where all the Fae are. They hate the Fae, and so she starts deciding, like, what should I do? She lists out all the weapons she has, and one of them, she says, is an arrow carved from Mount Ash, armed with an iron head. Later, you will find out that, like, Fae are not affected by iron at all, but the ashwood part is correct. She says, it was the ashwood that make their immortal healing magic falter long enough for a human to make a killing blow. I marked this for lore because now we know one of the only things that humans can protect themselves against the Fae with is ash arrows or weapons. And so she proceeds to shoot the wolf. It doesn't die immediately. It looks up at her, sad, and just kind of lets her kill him. She then, goes back home. She takes the wolf's hide with her as well, and she goes back home to her family because she's trying to feed her family. This is the very first time that you meet Nesta and Elaine, and this is how she describes them. On page 11, she says, Nesta had been born with a sneer on her face. Elaine sometimes didn't grasp things. It wasn't meanness that kept her from offering to help. It simply never occurred to her that she might be capable of getting her hands dirty. So Nesta is seen as this I'm too good for you kind of mean sister, and Elaine is kind of seen as maybe not very self-aware. Then I actually tabbed this as foreshadowing. As she's like talking to her family and we're getting this family recap, Feyre mentions the dresser that she paints, each of the drawers representing a sister. So she says, Violet and roses I've painted around the knobs of Elaine's dresser. The crackling flames I've painted around Nesta's, and the night sky whirls of yellow stars standing in for white around mine. I've done it to brighten the otherwise dark room. This each represents one of their personalities, but it also foreshadows kind of what will happen to them later on in the series. So if you stick around, this is kind of foreshadowing. And then she also talks about how when her mother was dying, she made the promise to her mother that she would look after her sisters. And she says, a promise was law, a promise was currency, a promise was your bond. So they hold promises very high in this world. And that will like kind of go throughout when she, goes to Prythian. Okay, so if we skip forward to page 28, we're not to the next plot point yet, but we do have some world building to talk about. On page 28, she talks about the dynamic between the Fae and humans. So she says, once, long ago, and for millennia before that, we had been slaves to high Fae overlords. Once we had rebelled across every land and territory. The war had been so bloody, so destructive, that it took 6 mortal queens crafting the treaty for the slaughter to cease on both sides and for the wall to be constructed. The north of our world conceded to the high Fae and fairies who took their magic with them. The south to we, cowering mortals, forever forced to scratch out a living from the earth. So that's kind of the backstory of how you get the Faes. The Fae, there was a huge rebellion, and so the Fae get north of this wall, and the humans get the south of it. Next major plot point occurs. So, after she kills this wolf, and they've gone to the market, they've done all these things, and they're back home. This beast is like a wolf, another wolf, but she calls it the beast, shows up at her house, asking who killed him, referring to the wolf who was Fae. The sisters are trying to lie. This is the first time you see Nesta show that she cares about anyone, because Feyre describes it as Nesta would go down swinging for Elaine. So Nesta would not help Feyre, but she would, you know, do anything to help Elaine. Eventually, it is agreed that Feyre is going to go with this wolf and live out the rest of her life in Prythian, which is north of the wall where the fairies live, since she killed him. And the treaty says, you know, life for a life kind of thing, and he's going to let her live out her days there. So she goes to Prythian. I'm going to stop here and explain Prythian slightly. So throughout the book, she gets more pieces of it, but Prythian is ruled by 7 high lords, high fae. There's 7 courts. So we have the summer, spring, autumn, winter, dawn, day, and the night court. Those are the 7 courts. They all have high lords ruling over them. And so Feyre's captor is Tamlin, and he is the high lord of the spring court. So she's staying in the spring court once she has been taken, and now she has to, you know, figure out how to survive and if she can get out of this or not. But she is secluded to the spring court throughout the entirety of this book up until the end. So towards the end, she does go somewhere else in Prythian. She goes under the mountain. But for majority of the book, it's in the spring court. And I'm going to say the first half of this book, not much happens. Okay? Not a lot of things happen that matter. All right. So for the first, 128 pages of this book, she's in Prythian, but not much happens. She overhears some conversations between Lucian and Tamlin that are foreshadowing for what happens at the end of the book. But our next major plot point is Lucian explains to Feyre how to capture the cereal. And so she wants answers. She wants to know if there's a way out of this treaty to go back home. So she goes and sets up and captures the cereal, and she successfully does it. And this is kind of foreshadowing because when she captures him, she's saying, "Are you not a member of the court?" And he says, "I'm a member of no court. I'm older than the High Lords, older than Prythian, older than the bones of this world." Put a pin in that, because if he's older than this world, that has me question things relating to Crescent City 3. And she says, "What can be done about the blight that is spread in Prythian, stealing and altering the magic? Where did it come from?" And all he says is, "Stay with the High Lord human. That's all you can do. You will be safe. Do not interfere. Do not go looking for answers after today, or you will be devoured by the shadow over Prythian. He will shield you from it, so stay close to him, and all will be righted." She continues to ask him questions, and all he kind of does is tell her about the King of Hybern, who is across the sea. His territory is not made up of courts, and that his throne is made of human bones. And he basically explains that Hybern is not happy with the treaty with the humans, and he's kind of preparing to have a war. He also mentions Amarantha, who was part of Hybern's plan to do this, but we get more details about her later. Essentially, he just keeps saying, "Stay with the High Lord and live to see everything righted." At this point, some more creatures show up. She has to run. Tamlin saves her. She saves the cereal in this moment because he is tied up, and when these other creatures come, she lets him go and she runs to safety. She does tell them that she captured the cereal. And I just want to say this because I think it's hilarious. This is a Legally Blonde moment here. Who says this? I think Tamlin says this, or it was Lucian. "You actually snared the cereal, human girl." And she says, "Despite myself, despite the afternoon, my lips twitched upward. Is it supposed to be hard?" That was giving me major, what, like it's hard? Talking about getting into Harvard. So they are starting to, banter a little bit. After the cereal is captured, there is this other moment that I think, this is where I have a question, okay? This is very interesting. So Feyre and Tamlin, again, they're just doing their thing. She's starting to warm up to him a little bit because there is this moment in which he comes back with a dying fairy whose wings have been cut off, and she wants to help. And this is her warming up to the fae. She feels bad for him, and her heart softens a little bit towards the fae. So after this event, her and Tamlin are starting to, not really understand each other, but she has maybe a little bit more empathy for his kind. Okay, if you skip forward to chapter 8, he wants to take her somewhere. So he decides that he's going to take her out to show her like his favorite place. Okay, they go there, and when they show up here, there is a like pool, not like a pool, but like a stream, like a pond kind of thing. And this is where I have a big like red flag. This is weird because this was never explained. And I've been questioning it ever since. So if anyone has any theories on what this is, please let me know. So essentially he shows her this pool. And she says the silvery sparkling water that dribbled from his hand set ripples dancing across the pool, each glimmering with various colors. And that looks like starlight, I breathed. He huffed a laugh, filling and emptying his hand again. I gave to the glittering water. It is starlight. That's impossible, I said, fighting the urge to take a step toward the water. This is Prithian. According to your legends, nothing is impossible. How? I asked, unable to take my eyes from the pool. The silver, but also the blue and red and pink and yellow glinting beneath the lightness of it all. I don't know. I never asked, and no one ever explained. To me, that is very suspicious that there is a pool that looks like starlight in the spring court. Okay, if anybody has theories, please drop them below. But just so you know, and that's on page 159 of ACOTAR, this starlight pool is described and never mentioned again. Very suspicious. This is also when we learn about Lucian's background. So Lucian is from the Autumn Court. He is the youngest son. He fell in love with a human girl. His father, was really angry. And so he, leaves and becomes Tamlin's emissary, during this time period. Okay. That's how Lucian shows up there. Okay. The next major plot point is Cal and Mai. So Cal and Mai is described a little bit, going up to it. So before Cal and Mai happens, Farah and Tamlin are talking about his background, his parents, and, she starts asking him, about their wedding, about them being mates, and this is where we get the description of mates. It says, if they're blessed, they'll find their mate, their equal, their match in every way, high fae wed without the mating bond, but if you find your mate, the bond is so deep that marriage is insignificant in comparison. This is supposed to be kind of rare, but as we see, everyone in this series gets a mate, so it's really not. Later on within this scene, she sees people setting up bonfires, and it's explained to her it's for Cal and Mai. That's in 2 days. It's called Fire Night. It's a spring ceremony where they light bonfires, and the magic that they create helps regenerate the land for a year ahead. Obviously, there's a lot more to Cal and Mai than that. So Cal and Mai, Tamlin tells her, stay in your room. You don't need to go out. Like, we're going to do our little thing. Stay in the house. Whatever you do, do not come out. But she feels like this string pulling her to the ceremony. And so she goes. And she also, before this happens, Tamlin explains to her about how he has to participate in the Great Rite, which later we find out is like a mating, not a mating, but like a mating ceremony. So he's got to go participate. Okay, she feels this pull. She decides to leave and she shows up. And as she's, going down there, she runs into a couple of fae who corner her, and are about to do really horrific things to her. And that is when we get to my favorite part of this book. She's about to be taken away by these fae, and then someone shows up, and she says, I reached for my knives, but sturdy hands grasped me under the shoulders before I could draw them or hit the grass. They were strong hands, warm and broad, not at all like the prodding bony fingers of the 3 fairies, who went utterly still as whoever caught me gently set me upright. This is when Rhys shows up. This is Rhys. They don't say it's Rhys yet, but all he says is, there you are, I've been looking for you, which holds a lot deeper meaning once we get to A Court of Mist and Fury. He tells them, thank you for finding me and finding her for me. Enjoy your right. And she describes him as the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Girly, if that is not a sign to you that this man is If you think that you're falling for Tamlin, and you see this mystery man, and you think all you can think is how he's the most beautiful man you've ever seen, okay. So he's also described as short black hair that gleams like raven feathers, pale skin, blue eyes that are almost violet, and he looked as if he had been modeled from the night itself, obviously, because he will later be told to her to be Rhysand. He's the High Lord of the Night Court. This is when she runs into Lucian. Lucian's like, whoa, why are you here? Like, you're not supposed to be here. Explains to her the whole event of the Great Rite. Each of the 7 lords performs one every year. They give their magic comes from the earth and it returns, so it's give and take. Tamlin will essentially have all this power in him. He becomes a hunter with one purpose. Okay? We're not going to go into that. So, she goes back home. She wakes up, runs into Tamlin. They have a whole thing going on because he's still got the magic in him. We're not going to really get into that. Alright, so after this happens, there are some things like heads being staked to the Spring Court gates with the Night Court symbol on it. And then also there's this line at some point where they're talking about, you know, how humans used to be in prison. And she says, you never made me feel like a prisoner. Okay, girlie, just wait. Just wait, because we gonna get there one day. All right, next we have a small event. The summer solstice happens. This is like much more chill of a ritual. They dance, have a great time. She's starting to fall for Tamlin. Like, they stay up all night dancing, basically. After this, her world kind of shatters a lot because Rhysand, the man that saved her during Calamite, shows up. When he comes back, he finds out about her. She gives him a fake name. And he vanishes. He goes away. Tamlin, it gets scared at this point because Tamlin's like, okay, they're going to try and kill you and your family. You are not safe here anymore. Like, my time is up. I've got to go back under the mountain. He's not telling her these things. But he's like, okay, you're going home. I'm sending you back home. And she, at this point, is like in love with him, does not want to go back home. She gets sent back home. When she gets home, she learns that Nesta actually... They were all glamored to believe she was staying with her aunt and that they had just come into money. Nesta resisted the glamour, which is rare. They say that is rare. And Nesta even tried to go to the wall to save her. She tells her that. So her and Nesta start to get this little understanding of they're going to do what it takes to, you know, protect their family kind of thing. And so essentially... Once they find out that Claire, the fake name she gave, her family's house was burned down because when Feyre gives this fake name, they actually go and like kill that entire family. And she knows she needs to do something. Nesta tells her, we don't need you here, Feyre. Do not look back. And Feyre says, they can lie, fairies can lie, and iron doesn't bother them one bit. But Ashwood, that seems to work. Take my money, buy a grove of it for Elaine to tend of Ashwood. And she says, if things are ever better or safer, I will find you again. And she leaves. So Feyre makes her journey back to the Spring Court. Takes her a really long time to find the hole, but she gets there. And that is when she sees one of the servants has been with her this whole time in the Spring Court. She finds her. And this is when Feyre learns everything. So essentially what the whole thing is this, there's this curse that she thought was a sickness this whole time. Actually, it was Amarantha who was part of Hybern. She went rogue. And when she did that, she brought them all to a masquerade. She essentially wanted Tamlin to be with her. He says no. And they get this curse. So, okay, so like at this thing, this is why they're all wearing masks throughout the entire book. And she gives him a chance to break the spell. So the curse is that he had 7 times 7 years before she claimed him, before he had to join her under the mountain. If he wanted to break her curse, he need only find a human girl willing to marry him, but not any girl, a human with ice in her heart, with hatred for her kind, a human girl willing to kill a fairy. The fairy she killed had to be one of his men. which Feyre did. So Feyre fit this curse, and she did not tell Tamlin she loved him back when he left, so she could not break it, and that is why. This is when Feyre decides she's going to be heroic as a little human and go under the mountain to save Tamlin. So, skip to we're at under the mountain. She tries to sneak through, does not successfully do that. She gets captured by Amarantha, and Amarantha basically tells her, you'll have 3 trials if you survive them all, like, whatever. They make a deal to let Tamlin and them go. And she says, or I'll give you another chance at any point you can answer this riddle. And the riddle is, there are those who seek me a lifetime, but never we meet. And those I kiss, but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favor the clever and the fair, but I bless all those who are brave enough to dare. By large, my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow. The answer is love. I didn't figure out that the first time, but Feyre doesn't figure it out either. So she has an option to do all these 3 trials or answer the riddle. The first trial is the Middengard worm. So she gets thrown into this pit with this worm who is blind but can smell her, I think, or hear her. And she has to run through this maze, and she successfully ends up killing it using bone shards. So she survives the first task, but she gets hurt pretty bad. So in her cell, she's dying. No one's coming to help her. And this is when Rhysand shows up again to help her. And he makes a deal with her that he will heal her if she agrees to spend a week every month. I think, yeah, a week every month with him in the Night Court. After some back and forth decisions, she agrees. And she now has a long tattoo because their bonds in the Night Court are made through tattoos. They're agreements. So she's got this tattoo now, which she's mortified of. There's a lot of in between of Rhysand taking her out to the court in between these days, in between trials and things like that. But then the second one comes up, and this time Feyre is illiterate. She cannot read, and she has to read to solve this. So she's panicking, trying not to like have this spike thing lower on her while she's trying to pick a lever. And she starts feeling when she goes to reach for one that it burns. And so she goes for the next one, it burns. And then one of them doesn't. And she realizes because of the eye on her tattoo, Rhysand is making her hand burn for every time she picks the wrong one. So she picks the correct one. He helped save her. She's good. More time goes by, and we get to the third trial, in which she has to kill 3 Fae. She gets through the first 2, they pull the hood off the third, and it is Tamlin. But she recalls this time when Lucian says that his heart is made of iron, which is the final part of the curse that no one told her. So she stabs Tamlin, but he doesn't die because it hits metal. And she successfully completes all of it. Amarantha's like, yeah, I know I said this, but you're not going. And so this argument happens. Feyre guesses the riddle, but it's too late because Amarantha snaps her neck and she dies. And she's kind of floating outside of her body watching all this happen. Rhys is screaming her name, trying, like, Tamlin's just sitting there like a little baby. And Rhys is trying to do everything he can to kill Amarantha, save her. Amarantha dies, okay? And after this, Feyre is just dead, okay? Feyre is dead, not a gratin. So all of the High Lords will come and they put part of their power into her, and it revives her. And they even mention that they've done this for a few people before, so that's interesting. But she does come back because they all give her power. This essentially ends with them leaving to go back to the Spring Court, where we'll pick up in book 2. You know, she kills the wolf, she goes to Prythian, lots of crap happens, she goes home, she comes back, more stuff happens, she dies, she comes back. Okay, this is literally just set up for the rest of the series. That's why this one is like all over the place. But in the next one, I will go in more in depth about all of the foreshadowing, all of the things like that. But for now, my main thing is, if anyone knows what that starlight, pool of starlight in the Spring Court is all about, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.